Another World Procurement Congress done, and it was a very interesting few days last week on a number of levels, as some really interesting themes emerged beneath the surface this year. There were some great conversations, a strong attendance, busy networking areas, and a lot of very friendly faces from across the ecosystem. And by Thursday afternoon, one of the hungriest groups of procurement professionals and software salespeople I've ever seen. That was one logistical issue that needs correcting for procurement leaders next year. There was also some big news announced during the week, which I'll come to shortly. So overall, there was a good energy, particularly on Wednesday, and the vendor stands, they all looked really impressive, although not everyone was pleased with their positioning. And the competition for the best conference merchandise appears to be escalating rapidly, as you may have seen from my photo on LinkedIn. But what really stood out for me this week was that two questions seemed to dominate almost all my networking conversations. The first was the usual one I always get from the vendor side of the ecosystem. How is the hiring market? That's become the most common theme for me at these events, especially from founders, CROs, investors and sales leaders trying to understand where the market is heading. And of course, when people think about their own career progression. But the second theme was even more interesting to me because it's becoming increasingly common in my day-to-day work. A lot of the conversations coming from the procurement practitioner side of the equation were less about software functionality and more about the vendors themselves. People were asking me things like, what do you think about this company? What's their culture like? How are they really performing? Are they stable? What are you hearing about leadership change and product direction? Will some of these businesses still exist in a few years' time? And there was definitely a huge amount of debate across the event around that final question, from practitioners, consultants, and even the vendors themselves regarding consolidation in the market. A lot of people recognise that many software businesses are under real pressure right now. Slower sales cycles, investor expectations, AI disruption, platform overlap, the race for orchestration leadership, and increasing pressure to prove commercial value. All of that made the news that broke on Thursday evening especially interesting. Rumours have been circulating throughout the day that Cooper were about to announce another acquisition. And then, during the awards dinner, news broke on LinkedIn that they'd acquired Tonkean to strengthen their orchestration capability. Given that so many of the conversations happening during the event were around consolidation and the increasingly intense race for supremacy in the orchestration and intake space, the time was remarkable, particularly as it broke moments before Oral Labs were announced as the ProcureSet Vendor of the Year for the second consecutive year. That's unprecedented, something I can't remember seeing before in the 20-year history of procurement leaders. So huge congratulations to their leadership team, and coming so soon after their recent Series C investment, it's clearly another significant moment for them and adds even more momentum to what is becoming a very interesting orchestration marketplace, particularly, of course, with the Cooper Tonkean news. Interesting as well that both Cooper and Oro both had their new CROs over from the States, whilst a few of the vendors appear to leave some of their biggest hitters at home. That surprised me a little, particularly given the scale of investment required to sponsor an exhibit at events like this, and the seniority of so many of the decision makers attending. In terms of the event itself, I thought it was good overall, and as always, there were some excellent speakers from outside the procurement world. I tend to enjoy these sessions the most because they bring a broader perspective to leadership, decision making, and the geopolitical environment that we're all operating in. One particularly interesting session for me was from the former Danish Prime Minister. She gave some valuable insights into the increasingly complex geopolitical landscape that businesses are having to navigate right now. I personally prioritise the sessions on leadership, operating model and capability, along with my networking of course, over the more vendor-led sessions. I'll probably do more of those, more of the software-focused content at DPW in New York next week. Some of those discussions around leadership and AI capability were genuinely interesting, particularly around future operating models, skills, and organisational readiness. That's also one of the reasons I've been spending so much time recently developing the Agentic Procurement Leaders Circle concept, because I believe many of the conversations at WPC reinforce the feeling that procurement leaders are still looking for a trusted environment to openly discuss what all this actually means for leadership, their careers, talent, and the future shape of the function. From the conversation I had with other attendees, there's probably a feeling that some parts of the conference content weren't drastically different from last year, but perhaps that simply reflects the reality that many organisations are still trying to work out what AI transformation actually means in practical terms. One session I heard particularly strong feedback about was the Nestlé presentation, and with their CPO winning CPO of the year, perhaps that's not entirely a coincidence. So, a lot of productive networking, fascinating industry talk, and from what I could see, many of the vendors appear to generate some very solid commercial opportunities, which is obviously vital given the scale of investment required to sponsor and exhibit at events like this. What's very clear to me after this week is that procurement is entering a very important transition period, not just technologically, but organisationally and commercially as well. And the leaders who navigate that well over the next few years are going to create a huge advantage for themselves and their organisations. Now for DPW, with a strong British contingent heading over the Atlantic for next week, I can't wait to see more friendly faces and learn from what should be a very progressive agenda. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in New York.